Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me. This is Studying the Bible with Brother Bolin. Today, I want to talk about religion and politics. Religion and politics, a very controversial subject in a lot of circles and in churches and so forth. And the reason why this subject is so controversial, I believe, is because when it comes to a person's religious beliefs or political beliefs, they're closely tied to who that person is. A person's religious beliefs in so many ways defines who they are. A person's political beliefs in so many ways defines who they are. So therefore, when it comes to religion and politics, it can be a very intensive and touchy subject. In fact, in my church, we are basically forbidden to discuss politics simply because I remember the last discussion, which is about a year or so, maybe a couple of years ago, that there was a very intensive debate that came up in reference to the former president and those who agreed and those who disagreed. So there was a intense verbal exchange there, for lack of a better word. And it became to the point where my pastor basically said we should no longer talk about politics in the church. And rightly so. I understand why that would be the case, because it was an intensive situation. And I think the problem was handled well, because when we discuss these kind of subjects, we have to be able to discuss these kind of subjects with sanity and professionalism. But on this channel, what I want to talk about is the mixing of politics and religion. The question is, do those two concepts mix? Because I've heard this said, religion and politics just don't mix. Religion and politics just don't mix. And you shouldn't talk about them. But not talking about controversial subjects is not going to solve the problem. You don't say, well, we're not going to talk about it because it's controversial, it's intense. No, it should be talked about, because when it comes to religion or spiritual matters and when it comes to politics, it should be something talked about, because those two areas are the areas that dictate people's lives. Your religious worldview determines your course in life. Your political worldview determines policies that are put in place that dictate the course of the country or the course of the city or the course of the state. So it should be talked about. It's just that it should be talked about professionally and with a strong moral basis. Now, the question rises, do religion and politics mix? And I'm going to give you my answer. The answer is yes. Now, I know this is a controversial answer, but I'm going to explain to you why I believe politics and religion do mix. We have to understand there's a difference between politics and religion mixing and politics and religion becoming one. Now, you may ask, what do I mean by that? In the early history of humanity, in the Babylonian Empire, historians say that the Babylonian Empire that was created by Nimrod in the book of Genesis, chapter 11, historians state that there was a religious belief system that he helped to create called the Babylonian religious system. It was the first one world religious system that was merged with the Babylonian government, making it a state-sanctioned or government-sanctioned religion, which simply means that everyone under its jurisdiction had to worship or had to adhere to the Babylonian satanic occult religious belief system. Didn't matter what else you believe, you had to submit to the Babylonian one world religious system. Why? Because religion and the government were married. There's a difference between being married or becoming one and mixing. Okay? another incident of religion and government mixing. We had religion and government mixing with Roman Catholicism. Now, I'm not putting anyone down to be a Roman Catholic that may be watching this. This is not an attack against that. But when Emperor Constantine won the battle, I forget what battle I forget who he was fighting against. But when he won that battle in the early, I think maybe like the 5th, 6th, 8th century, 9th century AD, when he won that battle against those group of warriors, he took Christianity, which was a religion at the time that was on the rise in the Roman Empire, but it was separate from the government. He took it and he sanctioned that religious belief system and made it a government belief system. In other words, Emperor Constantine, when he became emperor, he made Christianity the state religion. And the reason why he made Christianity the state religion was because, according to historical records, states that when he went to battle with these group of individuals, he saw supposedly a cross in the sky. And then it is said that he heard a voice, that God spoke to him. Well, not that God spoke to him, but it said that when he saw this cross in the sky, let me correct that. When he saw this cross in the sky, he told God, because he knew that cross was associated with Christianity. He told God, if you let me win this battle, I will become a Christian. Well, he won the battle, and because he believed that God, the God of the Christianity, had helped him to win this battle, he made Christianity the official state religion, merging or marrying, if you will, religion with the government. So now Christianity became the state religion. So all the other religions, which were a lot of pagan religions, a lot of mystery cult religions and so forth, that was going on at the time, had to submit to the state religion, which was Christianity, whom Emperor Constantine had made official. So what happened as the years went by, to make a long story short, as years began to go by, the Roman Empire began to lose its power. But Christianity began to gain power, began to gain prestige. Okay. And so by the merging of Christianity with the Roman government, it made the Roman government stronger, and it helped sustain the Roman government. Anyone who did not submit to the state-sanctioned Roman government's sanctioning of Christianity were persecuted and suppressed. I'm not going to go into too much detail with that, but that's just another example of religion and the government becoming one. When religion and the government becomes one or becomes married, that's where the problem lies in. That's where religion and government don't mix. They don't mix when they're married to one another, when they become one. Okay, I'm going to share with you what I mean by the government or politics and religion mixing, rather than politics and religion becoming one or becoming almost like they're married. All right. So this is what happened in the Roman Empire. Christianity became one with the Roman Empire. That's when we had the growth of the popes, the bishops, the cardinals, and it became about power and control, and not salvation. So everyone had to submit to the Roman government. Everyone had to submit to Christianity under the Roman government, just like everyone had to submit to the Babylonian religion under King Nimrod, rather, not Emperor Nimrod, but King Nimrod. Everyone had to submit to the Babylonian religion under the Babylonian system. Okay, so that's two instances of religion and government becoming one. The third and final instance of government and religion becoming one was in British England. You say, what are you talking about? Well, One of the reasons why the 13 colonies, American colonies, broke away from British England was because of religious persecution. And what I mean by that was that England, i.e. Britain, had what was called a state religion. That state religion was the Anglican Church. It was a state religion or a state church, meaning simply that all the other denominations and religious belief systems had to submit to the Church of England. If the other religious belief systems in Great Britain at the time did not submit to the state-sanctioned religion of England, they would be persecuted. Because why? You had a merging or a marrying of religion and government becoming one. Now it's about what? Power. It's not about salvation. It's about power. So in that sense, government and religion don't mix. Because when they marry, it becomes a problem. When they become one, it becomes a problem. It's no longer about spiritual things. It's about control. That you have to submit to the government's definition of religion and the government's religion. And if you don't submit to the government's religion, regardless of your religious beliefs, you will be persecuted. You will be suppressed. Okay. Now, going back to the idea of politics and government mixing, or government and religion mixing. The difference with mixing and becoming one or being married is that mixing is this. You might be a politician who's a Christian. Let's just say, for instance, you're a politician who happens to be a born-again, spirit-filled Christian. Your biblical worldview should, or more than likely will, influence your political decisions. This is how it was in the early history of America when it was first formed in 1776 with the Constitution. When the founders began to frame the Constitution, many of the founders had a biblical worldview. Now, there was a mixture of different worldviews, but for the most part, because of the school systems at that time taught the Bible, and every one of the schools, and we all should know this, that all the schools in the early history of America, in the 16th century, in the 17th century, in the 18th century, and the early portion of the 19th century, they taught the Bible. They would literally teach you. It would open up with prayer and you would be taught the Bible, in addition to math, history, science, and all these other subjects. So the framers of the Constitution, because they had been taught the Bible in the early history of America, had a biblical worldview. So when they framed and created the Constitution, when they framed and created the Declaration of Independence, when they framed and created the amendments, they did so with a biblical worldview, with biblical principles. Not that the Bible is quoted in the Constitution, but the principles of freedom is in the Constitution, and the principles of freedom and morality was derived from a biblical worldview. That is the mixing of religion with politics, not the marrying of religion with politics. In other words, their religious convictions and religious biblical worldviews had an influence on the way they ran the country. But they did not pick a particular religious belief to be the government-sanctioned religion for the American colonies. You had a right to worship in whatever capacity you wanted to worship, whatever denomination you wanted to worship. You had that freedom. Why? Because in Great Britain, the 13 colonies did not have that freedom. They had to submit to the state-sanctioned Church of England. But under the new system, they no longer had to do that. Why? Because religion and politics weren't married. They weren't one. They mixed, but they weren't one. You see. So, yes, religion and politics are important, and they should be talked about, and they should be discussed. But know they are not good when it comes to becoming one. But politics and religion does mix, which means that as Christians, when we vote, we should vote based on a biblical worldview, whether it's local, state, or federal. And I'm not trying to tell you who to vote for or what political party to vote for, any of that. What I am saying is simply this, that spiritual things, religion and politics do mix. It's when they become one that becomes the problem. But our spiritual Christian convictions should influence who we vote for. Why is that important? Regardless of the political party, why is that important? Because when you understand the policies of the politician that you're voting for, if their policies is anti-Bible, anti-moral, anti-Christian, and y'all know what I'm going, regardless of the political party, if their policies are anti-moral, anti-spiritual, anti-biblical, doesn't matter whether or not you like the politician or not. Liking the politician has nothing to do with their policies, because it's their policies that's going to run the course of the city, the state, and the country, not whether or not you like them or not. You can like them to death, but they could be the Antichrist for all you know. You can dislike them to death, but their policies could be more supportive of what the Bible says than anything. So as Christians, when it comes to mixing our Christian beliefs with politics, in that sense, they mix. Because as Christians, we should allow our biblical spiritual worldview to determine who and why we should vote, if in fact we are voting. Okay, so in that sense, it should be talked about. Religion and politics do mix, but religion and politics should not become one. When a state or the government takes a particular religious belief system and makes it the official state-sanctioned religion, that's where the danger comes in. That's where the danger comes in. So I just wanted to share that. My answer to that is yes. Religion and politics do mix when you understand the difference between the mixing of politics and the marrying of politics, to the mixing of religion and politics and the marrying of religion and politics. There's two different fundamental concepts. Another thing too, let's look at this biblically. Politics and religion, they still coincide. Why? Because what was Daniel? Daniel was a statesman, was he not? He was a statesman that God had anointed and gifted to speak to the Babylonian Empire. And God used him to interpret the dream of Nebuchadnezzar. And also we have, who else? Joseph, another man involved in what? Politics. He was involved in politics, but God used his gifting and his talents to promote his kingdom in the midst of a pagan kingdom itself, which was the Egyptian kingdom, the Pharaoh system. So we see this idea of politics and religion mixing, but not merging and becoming one when it came to the God of the Bible. Okay, so from a biblical perspective, it's supported biblically. Moses was a politician in so many ways, so many terms. The kings of the Old Testament were politicians. Well, why? Because they were kings, but they were following what? The mandates of God's word. They were following the mandates of God's word. They allowed the Torah, the law, to determine and influence their decisions for the people when they were following God. Okay? But it's important that we understand the difference between, yes, politics and religion mix in that sense. And let me end on this note. It's important for Christians in modern 2022 America to be keenly aware of what is going on politically. We can't separate politics and push it over here and then say, I'm just concerned about religion. and my church, and I'm not concerned about what goes on in the government. Here's the reason why I say that. Because Christians have been taught this idea of separation of church and state. And because of the phrase separation of church and state, they say, well, whatever the government does, I don't have nothing to do with that. We don't talk about what the government does. We don't talk about what the president does. We don't talk about what the mayor does. We don't talk about what the governor does. We don't talk about those things because the church is separated from government. We don't have nothing to do with that. Here's where we make a mistake at. That phrase separation of church and state is not in the Constitution. That phrase, separation of church and state, was created by President Thomas Jefferson, and he wrote it in a letter to a church in, I think, Danbury in the latter half of the 17th century. I think like in the 1790s. He wrote a letter to the church of Danbury where they was having a problem with the way, or they had some concern with the creation of the Constitution. They were concerned that the framers was going to create a state-sanctioned religious belief system. In other words, these Danbury Baptist Christians were concerned that the framers and the founders of America was going to create another system like it was in Great Britain, where everyone else had to submit to their one religious belief system. And Thomas Jefferson wrote that in that letter to refute that, to basically answer that. And his answer was, and I'm paraphrasing it, that the phrase separation of church and state was designed and put in that letter by Thomas Jefferson to protect the church from the state, not the state from the church. The phrase separation of church and state is not in the Constitution. So all this talk about what it's in the Constitution, no, it's not in the Constitution. The phrase separation of church and state is used by certain politicians today to quiet and shut up the church when it comes to things that the government is doing that's ungodly. That's why you hear politicians use that whenever a Christian says, well, this is wrong, what the government is doing is immoral. They use that phrase, separation of church and state, to completely take Christianity out of everything. And they use that phrase. But that's a misinterpretation of the phrase. It is not in the Constitution. It was in a letter written by Thomas Jefferson in the 17th century to the Danbury Baptists, who were concerned that they were going to create, the framers were going to create a state-sanctioned religious belief system that everybody else had to submit to. And Thomas Jefferson answered that and said that you do not have to be concerned about that. You have freedom of religion. And that's what this is about, freedom of religion. The new government would be, you're free to worship in any denomination that you are a part of. There would not be any government-sanctioned religious belief system where everybody has to submit. The phrase separation of church and state is to protect the church from the government, not the government from the church. And that's why he had that phrase separation of church and state. Okay? So the whole idea when it comes back to us as Christians understanding our role in government, we have to understand that we do play a role. Because the Antichrist, guess what? He's going to be a political leader. He's going to be a one world global political leader who will have a religious system. He will require that everyone worship him. Isn't that the merging of religion and government? So it's important as modern day Christians that we be aware of what's going on politically. We may not be led to become politicians, but we need to be aware of what's going on politically. And we need to address these political issues so that if we are voting, we will be able to make proper, biblically guided, spiritually guided decisions when it comes to who we vote for. Because in the ending of this video, we don't, regardless of the political party, we don't want to help promote the kingdom of the Antichrist with our votes. What if you voting for someone because you like them and you vote for them, and that person is the Antichrist, and their policies demonstrate that they're the Antichrist, and you voting for them? Guess what you're doing? You helping to hurry up and speed up the Antichrist kingdom. I don't think any of us want to be a part of that. So yes, religion and politics mix, but religion and politics should not become one. Okay? So that's what I wanted to talk about today. I hope you all have gotten something out of this video. If you like this video, press the like button. You have any comments, put your comments in the comment section below. Share this video and subscribe. God bless you all, and see you again on Studying the Bible with Brother Bolin.